Welcome to the Here's Waldo podcast, where we sit down with top visionaries and creatives in the video game industry. Together, we'll unravel their journeys and learn more about the path they're forging ahead. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hi, I'm Lizzie Mintis, founder and CEO of Here's Waldo Recruiting, a boutique video game recruitment firm. This is the Here's Waldo podcast. This episode is brought to you by Here's Waldo Recruiting, a boutique recruitment firm specializing in the video game industry that prioritizes quality over quantity and values transparency, communication, and diversity. We partner with companies, creatives, and programmers to understand the why behind their needs and provide a white glove experience that ensures a win-win outcome. Today, we have Ed Fries on the show. Ed created his first video games for the Atari 800 in the early 1980s. He joined Microsoft in 1986 and spent the next 10 years as one of the early developers of Excel and Word. In 1996, he left the Office team to pursue his passion for interactive entertainment and created Microsoft Game Studios. Over the next 8 years, he grew the team from 50 people to over 1,200, published more than 100 games, including more than a dozen that brought in over $1 million. He co-founded the Xbox Project and made Microsoft one of the leaders in the video game business. In 2004, Ed retired as Microsoft Vice President and began working as a board member and advisor with entrepreneurs in the video game business. He also serves on the board of many nonprofit organizations, including IGDA, the International Game Developers Association, the Pacific Science Center, and the Smithsonian American Art Museum. In 2019, Ed joined with some friends to launch One Up Ventures, a venture fund to support independent game developers around the world. Let's get started. Thank you for being here today, Ed. Can you tell us a little bit about One Up Ventures?
Yeah, so One Up Ventures is, as it sounds, it's a venture fund. We only invest in video game developers. And the whole idea of One Up Ventures is for each fund to invest in 50 different game companies around the world and then connect the founders of those companies together to form a community where they can all exchange information and help each other to be successful.
What made you decide to launch this fund?
You know, I was approached by one of the big Korean game companies, and they were looking for a way to get connected to developers in the West. I had been part of a community of game developers for more than a decade at that point. And it was kind of a really neat thing to be part of. It was this tight, supportive community of people who helped each other. And so I thought, well, what if I combine these two things, form a venture fund to bring funding to game companies, but also borrow from these other ideas of this community that I was part of. And bring that experience to more people.
What was this community?
You know, it's actually a secret community, and I'm not even supposed to talk about it.
Okay, we won't go into it. What were the early days like about starting your own fund? Did you feel like you kind of had a playbook from starting in so many companies in the past, or were there some surprises along the way?
Yeah, like a lot of things I've done in my life, I really had no idea what I was doing when I started. That's kind of a good thing in my experience. It's good to be a little naive when you go into something, if you kind of knew how difficult it was going to be, all the problems you'd have, you might stop yourself from doing it. In this case, though, I think it ran pretty smoothly. One of the first things I did was bring on a couple partners. And so those two partners are still my partners today. Kelly Wallach, who I started to talk to about this idea of community. She created something called the Indie Mega Booth and had kind of a similar experience as I had, where there was a lot of people who were founders of game companies and trying to get them to talk together and help each other. And so we kind of bonded the first time we talked. Then my other partner, Chris Wheaton, I had worked with him when I was on the board of the Pacific Science Center, and he was the COO for a while there. And he really helped with communication to the lawyers and setting up the venture fund in the deals that we do to make sure that we're, following the rules and the contracts say what we want them to say and that kind of thing. So between the two of them, they make my job pretty easy.
I love that. You have community and you have logistics and the vision. What makes you different than other investment funds?
Yeah, really, it's that focus on community. You know, that and Kelly and I had come from the video game business. We both spent a big part of our lives there, so I think we connect pretty well with the founders that we talk to, understand what they're going through, can give them advice from our own experience, but then also connect them with other people like themselves, and encourage them all to exchange information and help each other. Most venture funds, they are what are called lead investors. And on any one deal, there can only be one lead investor. And the lead investor takes the majority of the investment. And it's a big job to be a lead investor. You really have to do a lot of the due diligence to make sure that the team is what they say they are. You have to put all the legal documents together. And then you typically sit on the board of that company as it goes forward to watch over your investment. In every deal, there's a lead investor, but there's also usually room for follow-on investors. And follow-on investor is a lot easier. You put your money in to help fill out the round, and you don't have to do any of the other work that I was talking about. And so, typically a lead investor can only do a limited number of deals per year because of the work that they have to do and the ongoing work that they have to do. But a follow-on investor can do as many as they want. I knew that I wanted to build a community of 50 founders around each fund, and each fund was going to invest over a 3-year period. So that's a lot of deals, 16, 17 deals per year, more than one per month. You can really only do that as a follow-on investor. And so the challenge with being a follow-on investor is once the lead investor has decided to invest in a deal, typically there's a whole bunch of people who want to be follow-on investors. And so why should they take our money over someone else's? And really the answer to that has been that it's because we don't just bring money to the deal, we bring this community. And the community is a lot more than just connecting people together. We take the majority of the management fees that the fund generates, and we put those back into the community. So I'm pretty sure we're the only fund that does that. We use the money that comes from those management fees to fund things like industry data, which is expensive for little companies to afford. We make that available to all the founders. So that's an important perk. We do in-person events, both smaller events in different places around the world, and then a big annual event where we bring everyone together so they can spend time together for a few days every year and exchange information and really get to hang out with each other and get to know each other better. We do a lot of virtual events, at one every few weeks, to get people, again, sharing information. But we also have industry experts like yourself on to talk about their particular area and how their business works. And they're there to answer questions for people in the community. So it's a whole big program.
I love it. Very unique. And Kelly is the perfect person to drive that. So
She is.
so happy.
All the stuff that I'm talking about, it's Kelly's work there on it when it comes to community. So I'm glad you called her out.
She is wonderful. How many companies have you invested in, and how many do you plan to?
We are at about 64 right now. So we did the 50th and final investment out of the first fund last summer, and we're about 14 investments into the next fund right now. We're coming up to the end of our fiscal year in about September. And so kind of right on track, maybe a little even ahead of where we want to be for the year. Have to do 16 or 17 investments per year to get to 50 in 3 years.
So interesting to hear you say that people choose to take your money, because I feel like people on the other side have a totally different perspective. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, it is. It's funny. I don't know if it's like that in other industries when it comes to venture, but really the hardest part for these founders is to get a lead investor. And once the lead investor's in place, it's not that hard to find people to help fill out the round.
That makes sense. Here's the biggest question. What is the recipe for success, do you think, for a gaming startup? What makes you say, yes, I really want to invest in this company?
Yeah. I think part of it I can say, but part of it too is more a feeling that comes
Yeah.
from having done a lot of these deals over the years and sat through thousands and thousands of pitches, both Kelly and me. And so there's a rational part, and then there's a sort of emotional part to it, and sort of an intuitive part. But one thing I can say on the rational side is that game business has got to be one of the hardest businesses in the world, honestly. It has everything that can go wrong with making a piece of software, combined with everything that can go wrong with making a piece of entertainment. So you think about all the things that can make a movie go sideways, and you combine that with all the technical challenges of a piece of software, and it's really quite daunting. The good thing about working on something really hard, though, is it attracts really talented people who want to take this challenge on, this difficult challenge. And in the end, we're making a really exciting product, something that's fun and entertaining. Um, and so that I think is a strong draw too. So it's an industry where you're working really with amazing people. Um, but still success is tricky, and it's not always predictable. Why does one movie just take off and others fail? That happens in the game business all the time. One of the constants I see, though, is that the team is really passionate about what they're doing. It's the business is so hard that if you're just coming to work and doing your job, it's probably not enough. You really have to, believe in what you're doing and have the passion to, want it to be great. And so seeing that kind of determination and drive, I think, is one thing that really influences me to want to invest in a company.
That's why I recruit for the game industry. I did tech in the past, and people were so focused on money, or mostly money. But in games, people love what they do, and they're so passionate, and their dream is to work on or create a certain title. So
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
it's inspiring. I think it gives you energy.
Yeah.
You've listened to thousands and thousands of pitches. What do you think maybe a common pitfall is? Maybe it's just the inverse, not having really passion, but what would you say there?
Yeah, I think when I talk to the more experienced people that I talk to, the more interesting and unique the pitches are. So, if people have less experience, the pitch tends to look more like sort of a little twist on whatever's popular right now.
Yeah.
And really what I see is more bravery from people who've done it longer, you know, more willing to take chances to do something new and really original. And for us, when we sit through a lot of pitches, there can be a certain sameness to them, and so it's always exciting for us when we hear a new idea or somebody who's willing to take on something, or even someone who, in the game business, and I think this happens in all entertainment industries, you kind of end up building up this set of rules that, oh, well, you can't do it this way, or this will never work, or this is going to fail because they tried that, 7 years ago and it didn't work. And so people brave enough to challenge those those rules that aren't really rules, right? And to be able to say, well, yeah, but no, that no one really did it the right way. They didn't really think it all the way through, but we have. Um, and So it's things like that make it fun for us during the pitch and fun for us to work with these companies as they try really to do you know, it's almost the impossible, right? I mean, you're trying to do in the game business, you're always trying to do something that's never been done before. Because if you're doing something that's been done before, it's not that interesting, you know. Plus, you have that thing about tech where tech is always moving forward, and so if you're just doing what's happening now in tech, it's in the 3 years by the time it's done, it's old news. So you're always shooting for something just beyond the horizon, right? Both on the technology side, but then also creatively, and being able to shoot far but not too far, is a real challenge, and really can be the thing that determines success or failure.
Games take so long to make often, especially the larger studio, big budget games. So I
Yeah,
imagine it's quite a challenge point where you started from when you have the idea versus shipping whatever years later. Is it still the thing of the moment?
yeah, yeah. I mean, it can be 3 to 5 years, and that's a long time. So being able to keep a team together during that time and course correct along the way as new technologies emerge, but still stick to the vision that you had about why this, if you can create this, it's going to be something people really want, you know?
Yeah. So you need somebody that has unconventional ideas and can inspire others. Basically, a classic CEO, really.
That's a good summary. I'm glad you said that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've advised tens of companies that have been acquired by companies like Twitch, Razer, Adobe, Microsoft. What do you think makes these companies so exciting to be acquired? I feel like that's always, for many, a big dream.
Hmm. Yeah. I think I think the key is still what we were talked about before is to focus on the product you're trying to build, the way you're trying to change the world, whatever that world is, you know, bring something new, whether we were working on spreadsheets or word processors or video games, trying to trying to bring something to your customers that they don't even know they want yet, you know. And but when they see it, they'll be like, wow, I gotta have this. If you concentrate on that, the other stuff tends to work itself out, acquisition, blah, blah, blah. Um, that'll work out once the product's out and it's successful and people love it.
Yeah. When we first met, we talked about how founders always struggle. They go from one to two or from a small team and they hit
Mm.
10 people and it's this whole new field. And then they're 25. And tell me a little bit about, there's some themes that all companies kind of phases that they go through. So what are the common phases, struggle points through those phases, and how do they overcome them?
Yeah, it's almost like powers of two. I don't know. I'm an old programmer, so we all think in powers of two. But it's sort of every time it doubles, I think that whole new sort of things emerge. When you've got a handful of guys and they're all in one room and they're all working on something, there's easy communication and everyone understands what's going on. But once it gets big enough, they get separated into different offices, and the communication has to become more formal. Maybe your groups are becoming more specialized, so you have artists and then you have programmers, and those teams start to speak different languages, and you have to have communication between those languages. They need more oversight above them, like a producer, not necessarily above, but alongside of them, somebody to help keep them on schedule. And so you just kind of, as the group grows and grows, you have to add more systems, more processes, more rules. When I started on Excel, we had 7 programmers on the first version of Excel for Windows. And then we went to 15, and then we went to 35, and then we went to 50. And each of those kind of steps really felt different. And we were very much we want as few rules as possible kind of kind of attitude. But that's kind of what it came to. It was like you wanted to have as few rules as possible, but not fewer, not like less than we needed. And
Yeah.
as we grew, we needed to put in more rules, so it's a matter of sort of resisting the temptation to get too bureaucratic, but at the same time, understanding that communications become more difficult, processes need to be more, like one example from when I was working on Office was, um, every day people would check in their changes, and then we would do a big build, and hopefully it would work. You'd try to check in stuff so that you don't break other people's things. Well, when there's 7 people checking stuff in, you know, if you make a mistake once a week, then it's broken every day. When there's 30 people checking in, you can only make a mistake every month, and it's still broken every day. you know so that means you have to be a lot more careful every time you check in, because you can only make a mistake less often, and still it's broken all the time, if that makes sense. So that's one example of how scale um, makes things harder on these teams.
Yeah, it is harder. It's all hard, really.
I yeah, yeah. And for me, moving up through, from being an individual contributor to managing a small team to managing a bigger team, and so on, that was an interesting process, in the sense that, like, when I started, what really mattered for me to be successful was to be really good at just one thing, which was writing code, you know, and I was pretty confident in my code writing ability. I had started writing games, and I had written more code than probably most people my age at the time that I started. But I still had a ton to learn from the people around me when I got to Microsoft. Um, but as I moved up, it was almost like it became less important that I was good at any one thing, and more important that I wasn't bad at any one thing, which is a really different thing, you know. Like, when I was a vice president, I had to do so many different things every day, um, you know, and from, I don't know, giving a speech in front of a big group, to maybe firing somebody, to talking to the press, and doing a good job there, to doing some kind of budget review and understanding the financial side of things, to dealing with technical people, dealing with artists, and so it becomes, as you move up, more about um, more about well, not sucking at any one thing, like, at that point, failure tends to come from having some one part of all the different things that you need to do that you're just not able to do well enough. Um, but also being able to make trade-offs, I think, is really important at that, as you move up. At some point, um, you get to the point where there's just more work than you can do in a day.
Yes.
And I've seen this before in a lot of people's careers, where they get to that point, and the way that you get past that point is by being able to make compromises and trade-offs. And some people can't do that. It's like, they're no, everything I do is perfect. Uh, that's what I do. And it's like, okay, if everything you have to do is perfect, then you can only go so high. You know, do you know what I'm saying? Because at some point you have to decide, I don't have time to do perfect on all these things. I'm going to do good enough on these things, and I'm going to do great on these things, you know?
Yes. My mentor named Chris Mandarino always talks about getting things out the door. She says 70 to 80% is good. Sometimes she goes down to 60, but it is important to do the thing, because I think a lot of people agonize and agonize and agonize, and it takes you so long to get that last 10% done. Or you want to hold on to so many things because they're just done how you want to do them, but you can outsource it to someone else and maybe they'll give you 80%, but at least it's getting done.
No, that's exactly right. I mean, some people can't do that. They can't delegate something to someone else and let them do it their way, right?
It's hard.
No, I'm going to take it back and redo your work, um, no, that's so all of those are kind of lessons that you learn often painfully as your job gets bigger.
Yes, ups and downs. What advice would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs who are considering starting their own business?
Well, I mean, one piece of advice I have for people is to think about what's the worst that could happen. You know, I mean, if somebody really wants to start something, they come and they're like, you know, I really have this cool idea and I really want to go do it, but I don't know, I mean, like, I mean, got this good job and blah, blah, blah. It's kind of like, well, do you think somebody would hire you back later?
Yes.
You know what I'm talking about? Do you think, the fact that you went off and learned some new skills would make you less hireable than you are now? I don't think so, so I think that that's the thing is getting people to be willing to take that kind of risk, knowing that they can always get a normal job if it doesn't work out, you know?
Yes.
Now it doesn't mean you want to do something crazy like mortgage your house to fund this new project or whatever, right? Use other people's money, like ours, to help fund your risky endeavor. We're set up to handle risk. We're very diversified. Our investors are big boys that know what they're getting themselves into. Um, yeah, but as long as you're, you know, learning new skills and, understand that it's risky, and you can always get a normal, safe job. I think it's a good thing for people to try.
Yeah. I told myself that too when I started here as
Did
well.
you?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's scary. I thought maybe I'll just get a job internally somewhere. What should I do? I mean, you agonize over it. It's a big, scary. It's an unknown. And it's always an unknown. And you just wade into the unknown. But it's good. For the right person, it's good.
Yeah, and you can get experience. I mean, I started some little companies on the side when I was at Microsoft and ran them and got some experience from that. And you can you can get sometimes more entrepreneurial stuff in your job at a big company. Try things like that.
Yeah.
But still, there is at some point that step you have to take, and it can be scary. I remember when I was deciding between a couple different job offers that I had to go what to do next after working on Word. And I went to, I was really like, I just remember like my stomach feeling bad. I was like really stressed about it, I was like, oh, there was kind of this job that I really had passion for, which is to get back into the game business, and then there were some safer choices that people were like, and people were literally telling me like, um, that if I took this games job, one vice president told me I'd be committing career suicide. That's
Oh,
what they said. Um, Another one said, why would you leave office, one of the most important parts of this company, to go work on something no one cares about? That's what they said when I said I wanted to go do this games thing. But anyway, I went and I talked to this guy was a senior guy at Microsoft who had been kind of a mentor to me. And and I talked to him and I'm like, I can't decide, I'm thinking these different jobs, and here's all the pluses for this one, and here's the pluses for that one, and blah, 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 and he's kind of this guy from Texas. He's very not Microsoft, like the Microsoft, typical Microsoft person was like, who's the smartest guy in the room? And they're like trying to, talk the fastest and be the smartest. This guy was the opposite. He had the kind of the Southern drawl, and he took everything slow. And it would be like, he'd like, he just didn't play that game, but then he'd say something in his own slowish way, and you'd realize, whoa, that was the smartest thing anyone said in the whole meeting, you know? So anyway, So I go to him and I was like, yeah, blah, 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 and then this and that, and I can't decide, and I have this, and he looks at me and he says, Ed, he says, sometimes you can't figure out what's going to happen ahead of time. Like sometimes you just got to decide. And I was like, oh, that's such good advice. I was like, it was like a weight coming off my shoulders. It was like, he's totally right. Trying to like figure out the future that's unpredictable. I just have to make a decision, try something and see what happens. And we'll see, you know. So I decided to do the games thing and it worked out. We did Xbox, and by the end, people at Microsoft actually cared about games.
It was not a waste of time after.
Yeah, it turned out to be something they did care about. So
And that's where your heart was too.
exactly.
That's so important. I talked to a lot of people who are figuring out what job to take. And it's always interesting to hear the analysis, and there are spreadsheets and so many things involved. But I'll give them.
It's easy to get caught up in that, to think that you can just figure it out.
Yes, I have a formula. I'm going to plug my jobs in, and I'm going to see which one ranks higher.
This one's 97.4, 93, whatever. Yeah,
I'm going to work on words. Yeah. So I went on your LinkedIn because I'm a recruiter, and I saw that you started a company called FireAnt that you had for 6 months and then got acquired by Sony.
Yeah, I was basically helping some guys who worked in my team.
Oh, okay.
So after I left, after I left Microsoft, there was kind of a cost cutting after I left. In fact, it's kind of related to me leaving. There was a lot of pressure to cut projects I really didn't want to cut. And at some point I decided, this is probably a good time to go. So this one project in particular got cut, and I felt bad about that. And I really believed in the guys. And so I teamed up with them and helped them start a little company to take that idea forward. Microsoft, ironically, when they canceled the project, they said that to these guys that they could take the intellectual property with them, so that they could continue to develop what they were developing. And then Microsoft reneged on that promise, unfortunately. But still, these were really good guys, and it wasn't hard to find a place in the industry for them. And so Sony approached the company and wanted to acquire them, which was great. I was just there to help them get started. So I did not go to work for Sony, although sometimes there's press coverage from there that makes it sound like I did. They worked for Sony for a long time. They worked on a game that became called The Agency, which was kind of a spy MMO, but unfortunately it never saw the light of day like many games. So
I think about that a lot. How many games get canceled that were just a hit waiting to happen?
Yeah, it happens. Sometimes I run into people who been in the industry, a dozen years or more, and they tell you, and I worked on this, and I got canceled on that. I mean, it doesn't happen that often that someone's been there that long and never shipped anything, but sometimes you meet those people who've just had that string of bad luck, to be on the wrong projects.
I hired a guy who every single studio he had worked at over the last 15 years and shut down.
That's what I'm talking about. I meet people like that too, and it's going to happen statistically, but it doesn't happen to everyone. Most people find their place and end up working on something that they can be proud of.
Definitely, I learn a lot along the way, but it is always hard, especially if your game is canceled and can't showcase your work, and you're trying to interview and talk about what you've done, but you can't. So
yeah, not just showcase it, but I mean, these are people who put a ton of passion into their work, and to know that work was in a way wasted, right?
Yeah.
Something that you did for a while and it's just gone. That's tough.
But maybe you have learning that then on the positive side of things, something you learned during that process that you can implement in your next venture and you can make the next killer app, killer game.
Yeah, well, you probably learned some things that you probably watched that studio did wrong, and you know what to look out for the next one that you sign on with.
Yeah, absolutely. If you were a large company, maybe Microsoft, maybe another large player in the industry, what direction, what focus would you have? Where do you really think the industry is going and the companies need, or the large companies need to adapt to?
Yeah, well, we're in the entertainment industry, and in games, you have this mix of technology, and technology moves forward relatively quickly, and art, and art doesn't move forward in some ways at all. It's about the same things that the Greeks were writing plays about, thousands of years ago. It's about the human condition of being a human being. And I think a lot of people who aren't outside the game business don't see games that way yet. But that's because they don't really understand what games are and where they're going. And games are really a medium of expression, a medium of communicating among humans, human ideas. And so you look now and see how all these games, I was just watching the new series, The Witcher on Netflix, right? Um, game related intellectual property, and that actually started from a book series in Poland. Um, uh, you know, are affecting more and more media beyond just games, right? More movies are based on games. Uh, more people spend more time playing games than watching movies or TV. But it's still to meet that same desire, that human understanding, human connection, right? So there's sort of what's changing and what's not changing, and they come together both in games, which I think is interesting. I'm not sure I answered your question, but so when it comes to big companies, it's easy to screw up games, and I see a couple themes in that. Um, like you can look at Amazon's been trying to do games for more than a decade now, and has yet to ship a single really successful game. That's scary. Um,
But not that, and it's Amazon.
Yeah. Um, Disney is a good example of a company that struggled with their game business. And I actually did some consulting with them after I left, and I could see why they were having problems. And basically, in the case of Disney, they put their games group underneath their consumer products group. So they had their movie division, and in the movie division, there was the understanding at the company that movies are hard and they fail or succeed, but they are creative endeavors that are risky. But games were under consumer products, and the other things that were under consumer products were things like Mickey Mouse T-shirts. And when you sell a Mickey Mouse T-shirt, you better make a profit, or you're bad at your job. And especially inside Disney, you could take a Disney property, say, something like, I don't know, name a Disney movie, Lion King, and you could license it to other game companies and make guaranteed money, whether that game succeeded or not. So when you try to build a games group in that environment where you're not allowed to fail, they would never do movies that way, but they thought that was okay for games. But games and movies are very similar. In fact, games are just like harder movies. They have, like I said, they have all the risk of a movie combined with all the risk of a piece of software. They have this added technological risk. So that's why they failed. And ultimately, they completely eliminated their games group and just went to pure licensing, which is one way to solve the problem. It means they'll never be very successful in games, but it means they'll never have failure. So, you know, Amazon, to their credit, they've stuck with it for a long time. They've just been doing some things fundamentally wrong. And so, you know, you can, if you just do something wrong forever, you're just going to fail forever. So, you know, I mean, some people give up too soon in games because it can take a long time to develop uh, all the things you need to build a game and to fail with it and understand why you fail with it and try again. I mean, CD Projekt Red is a great example. You know, their first success really came with Witcher 3. They didn't come with Witcher 2 or Witcher 1. You know, I was in a conference in Spain, and this guy got up and gave one of the most amazing talks I'd ever seen. And it was about Witcher 2 and about all the things that went wrong. And the whole theme of the talk was, and then this terrible thing happened to us. Like, and then we had two choices. We could do the easy thing or we could do the right thing. And we chose to do the right thing. And it cost us millions of dollars and we had all these problems, but we did the right thing. And then he went over and the whole talk was just like one after another after another. And then we could do the easy thing or we could do the right thing, you know? And I was like, wow, at the end of the talk, I was like, wow, these guys, they have really big ambition. They say they're going to be the next BioWare and this little group in Poland, you know, but then at the end of the talk, I was really believing they were going to do it, you know? And their next product was Witcher 3, which was incredible. So anyway, now I'm really rambling, but
No, no, it's good. There are always ups and downs. And yeah, it's interesting to predict success, what's going to be successful and what's not. But I feel like after a while, like you said, which made me laugh, I thought your answer was going to be you go with your gut for when to invest, because that's what everybody says. I go with my gut, everybody who has any level of success. So it's funny to break that down. Making games is life or death, like you were saying a lot of times. What are the biggest challenges or very near disasters? I'm sure there are many that you've encountered throughout your career. And how were you able to navigate that to avoid disaster and find some success?
yeah. So, I mean, this kind of gets to another thing that I was going to talk about. And something that we had to learn as we were going through growing Microsoft's game business is that one of the things that really makes these companies successful is the company culture that they build. And when we were first acquiring game companies, we would acquire them, move them out to Microsoft, integrate them within our bigger team, just like they were, you know, just like more cogs in the machine or something,
Yeah.
you know. Here's how we do things at Microsoft. Here's what our offices are like. Here's what, you know, here's how we, you know. And when you do that, it took me a while to understand that when you do that, you're really trying to take one company culture and bolt it on top of another company culture. And you know, Microsoft certainly has a successful company culture for building spreadsheets and word processors and things like that. But is it a culture that makes creative products and risky products? You know, we had just acquired Bungie and we're moving them out to do Halo, and I had a big area of a building ready for them. Our facilities people had come in and done it all out Microsoft style, and I was very proudly leading them around this new wing of this building. And I was like, you know, and here at Microsoft, everyone gets their own private office with the door, and you know, here, look at these beautiful offices, and you've got this view out here, and you've got this, you know, and here's your little cafeteria area, and blah blah blah. And I got to the end of the tour, and I'm like, "What do you think?" And they said, "We hate it." And I'm like, "What? You know, what do you mean you hate it?" And they said, "Well, we don't like to have all these walls. You know, we just want to be in like one big room and have like little cubicles." And I'm thinking, cubicles, like that's like the lowest status thing you could have at Microsoft. It was like, even an entry-level programmer at Microsoft gets their own private office so they can close the door and work quietly. You know, um, I don't know, maybe some accounting people somewhere have cubicles. I don't know, but you know, but that wasn't, that was me not understanding the point, right? It
Yeah.
was like the point was that we're a collaborative team. We want to be able to really work together, exchange ideas. We want the programmers and the artists to be sitting together so they can, when the tools break, they say to the programmer next to them, "Hey, your tool broke. I can't do what I want." They don't want everybody off in their own little office spread out across this building. So that was a real learning experience for me. And I had to call the facilities guys and all those walls you just built in that building for me, tear those all out, please. We're going to do this a different way. But that was kind of an experience that was kind of a turning point for me in understanding that culture is really important to these companies. We were working with a little company called Ensemble Studios down in Texas, and we had never had the time to kind of integrate them, to move them up. And sort of after that Halo experience, I kind of realized I'm glad we never did. They each have their own unique spirit, their own unique culture, and they can be very, very different. Ensemble and Bungie were both very successful companies, but they worked very, very differently. They had very different cultures. And they both, that's what made them great. Is that they had this strong culture. It didn't have to be the same culture. There isn't one culture that works for making games,
Yeah.
but a strong culture, and I'm sure you know this from recruiting, it attracts a certain kind of person, right? Like part of what a culture is like it's a filter for who fits our culture and who doesn't fit our culture, right? And so, whereas Ensemble had a very family kind of culture, um, uh, Bungie had a very hardcore culture. We're the smartest. We're gonna work the hardest. We're gonna, do this amazing stuff. Both of them made amazing products, but they did them very differently. And so, a big company can come in and just wipe out a culture accidentally without even appreciating it.
Yeah.
And then the people don't fit with the culture anymore, and the culture doesn't express itself through the product anymore, that kind of thing. So there's a lot to that.
I think about that a lot, how your internal team's happiness and function is everything that you don't see, right? All your productivity, how you have processes, how your culture, and the final product you see at the end, but you have to have all of that in sync. And maybe that's why some larger tech companies that have a game org struggle because it's part of this larger product, but it's not its own.
Exactly. That's why I'm talking about it now. And I assume that that's something related to the problems that Amazon has, but I'm not close because I know a lot of people that they hired. I know very good people that they hired across the industry who they brought in there.
Yeah.
And I saw them fail one after another, even though there were people I had a ton of respect for who I knew how to do good work. And so it has to be something bigger. It has to be some, corporate culture level thing that's not letting them do their best work.
Yeah.
Um,
That's word on the street. You get to know what's going on at all the companies.
I bet.
So it's fun to hear. But yeah, they had a huge team, and I hope they find what they're looking for and some success and figure it
And
out.
I mean, to their credit, they keep trying. They keep making changes. They're going to get there.
What technology are you the most excited about that is coming out?
Yeah. So normally, if you asked me that question almost any other year, I would have told you that I really don't believe that much in getting excited about technologies. I mean, I am like a technology guy, and I do get excited about it, but I think technologies are really, in general, hard to predict. It's like I think we're on VR wave number 5 or 6 in my career. Where and where you see these technology, is it going to work this time? No, turns out people still don't want to put this thing on their face, even though they can have this really cool experience. No, it still makes them sick, that kind of thing. But right now, I think there's a really different thing happening that goes beyond my normal objections to looking at these waves of technology, and that is the AI stuff that's happening. And it this isn't like everything else. That this isn't like another VR or Web3 or name another technology du jour, flying cars, self-driving cars, whatever you want. This is a fundamental discovery that no one saw coming and it's hard to predict how big an impact it's going to have. But my personal opinion is almost everyone's underestimating how big an impact AI is going to have on the world over the next couple of years.
Do you have an idea?
So that's a pretty strong statement, I guess.
Yeah, no, it's a polarizing topic, but it's here. In what way do you think it will impact the game industry the most?
Well, I'm speaking far beyond the game industry, but you can take almost any job function and look at how this technology is going to change the way people work. When I was working on Word, more than 20 years ago, more than that now, coming up on 30 years ago, I had this idea. I actually have a patent on the wall over there for this thing. And my idea was, well, what if a word processor, it's not really what if instead of being like a word processor, it could be more like a sentence processor, document processor, like it could really understand beyond just words what's going on. Then if that were true, imagine what kinds of features you could add. And so I'm like, so imagine you could have like a set of, like, I call them knobs, a set of knobs that you could turn. Like once you wrote this document, like you're working on a paper for school and it comes out, it's 1,000-word paper and you come out 900 words. And you're like, oh, I just want to turn the length knob a little bit to get it up to 1,000 words. And then the 1,000-word document. Okay, great. Or, this is like this academic document. I don't really understand it. I want to turn it down to like, 5th grade level or whatever. So I can read this, or turn it up. Oh, I write this thing, but now I want to sound, fancier. Okay, let's turn it up. Or maybe, there's a knob for how colorful it is, or sort of a style knob or any number of things. But the only knob I could really figure out how I might be able to do, in the early 90s was a summarized knob, like one that to like shrink the document down. And so I worked with Microsoft's research group and we came up with some ideas for how to do that. We actually added this feature to Word where it was called auto summarize, where you could shrink a document. But the whole idea of that was that it was like to be the first knob in a series of knobs as things became, as we got better and better at understanding text. And really, it's a long time before there was any real progress in that. But now we have, just sort of overnight the ability to do that easily in any number of ways with something like a chat GPT, right?
Yeah.
You can feed a document in and then tell it, no, I want it longer, or I want it shorter, or I want it to sound better, any number of, I write it like the author so-and-so would do it. I mean, way beyond what we could have imagined back then. But that's just one tiny aspect of what's happening now. I mean, you have all the image generation code. As a programmer, I still program. I was doing some programming on the airplane the other day, flying back from Tokyo, and it was funny for a couple of reasons. I was writing Python, which is not a language I know very well, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to be offline for the next 10 hours. Dang it, because I'm going to like pretty quickly I'm going to run into some Python syntax stuff that I don't know. But then I was like, oh, actually, I've got some large language models, some small large language models here on my laptop. I can just start one of those up and ask it Python questions, you know? And so I was like, how do I do this in Python? I need to format a date. I don't know the syntax for using the command to like show a date and time properly. And it's like this little large language model running on my little laptop goes, here's how you do it. You know, you do it like this. It's like, oh, thank you. I didn't have access to the internet. I didn't have a book. I had a little large language model. I mean, the thing is 4 GB. That's tiny, you know, but it knows just about everything about everything.
Yeah.
It's mind blowing. Anyway, I could go on and on this topic for hours. I really don't think people understand the impact it's going to have. And so, you know, programmers makes them more efficient, makes them a lot faster, doesn't replace them, but makes them a lot more efficient. Artists, same thing. You know, we still need artists to have a vision for what something's going to look like in a game. But a lot of game art is incredibly tedious. You know, somebody sits there, you know, for months drawing this beautiful statue, creating this 3-dimensional model for the statue that the player is going to run past guns blazing, you know, and barely even notice this thing sitting in the corner. It's like, I made that statue. It doesn't, it's not a good use of human time, you know, to craft that stuff all by hand, you know, when we have better tools. So, but we still need human direction and human oversight to make it all look consistent, to make it all look like one thing. I got a pitch deck the other day, and I could immediately tell it was generated art, and the art was beautiful. The way I could tell was every single image looked like it was made by a different artist.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I, you know, as soon as I mentioned it to the team, they're like, yeah, you know, we just got like 3 guys. We needed to do this, which is fine. But so anyway, I'm not at all bought into the AI is going to destroy the world. AI is going to make everyone lose their job. But I am into that. This is really going to change the way that we all work, and that we're all going to need to adopt these technologies as quickly as possible to be competitive.
Yeah. Just like anything, adopt or die. But I feel like I'm overwhelmed by the amount of AI tools that are out there. And it feels challenging to even wrap your mind around it. Nonetheless, them in the most effective way.
Yeah. You know, every Friday, YouTube video comes out. This guy says, here's what happened in AI this week. And I watch it so I can see what are all the things. He's like, oh, this was a pretty slow week in AI this week. I just watched it this morning. You know, only these 10 things happened, you know, and they were all pretty amazing. So yeah, it's moving fast. And I think it's going to be even bigger than people think. Usually tech gets overhyped when tech stuff comes out. This is a case where I think it's underhyped. I honestly do.
Yeah, it is. It is the new Web3 crypto. That was the GDC joke. That's the new buzz. But yeah, that's exciting. What do you think about the new Apple headset?
I'm lukewarm on it. I haven't tried it, but I'm sort of in a phase where I'm a little burned out on VR again. I think they put some interesting innovations in it that haven't been tried before, but I think fundamentally the problem these things have is that people don't want to put them on their face. You know, I think it's a pretty fundamental problem. You know, you might remember, God, it's like 15 or 20 years ago now, the TV business was going to go to all 3D TVs. And they made this big push to advertise these 3D TVs. And all you had to do was wear the super light pair of these shutter glasses that have the little shields that faster than you can even see click back and forth. And then all your TV viewing can be in 3D. And how amazing is that going to be? No one would wear it. No one wanted them. No one wanted to wear those dorky glasses, sit around with their friends. No one would do it. It was this huge multi-year effort to bring this thing to market, and it failed like, I don't know, a year. Like it was, it came and it went. And now here we're almost 20 years later now, and nobody's talking about 3D TVs, or almost nobody. So I think, you know, human beings are complicated. They're, when it comes to something that's going to be on their body, on their face, or whatever, there's a lot of social stuff about that. There's a lot of fashion stuff that I think, as tech people sometimes forget. Like, oh, we built this cool gadget. Why won't people wear it?
Yeah.
Because it makes me look stupid or whatever. I don't know. So, like,
Yeah.
I'm a little dubious. There's some technical issues about what they're doing too that we could get into, but I actually think I'm talking more about the fundamental problems.
We'll see. I'm excited. I mean, if anybody can make it a thing, it's probably Apple. So,
yeah, it's betting against Apple is a risky business for sure. But also, Apple's had a series of failures, just like anyone in tech. Nobody's tech record is 100%. So
yeah,
we'll see.
we'll see.
I'm wrong all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. My last question, who has been your biggest mentor throughout your career, and what was the best advice that they gave you?
Oh my gosh, that's a hard one. I had
Maybe
so many mentors. Probably the biggest mentor for me was a guy named Chris Peters. He was my first boss when I joined Microsoft full time, and he was my boss at he really helped me go from being an individual contributor on Excel to managing a small team. He helped me fire the first person I had to fire, which was difficult for me. He then moved over to Word and immediately got in a fight with the development manager in Word, and the development manager quit, and then he brought me over to run it. So he had a big influence on my career through Microsoft, but I learned a lot from him over the years, and seeing how he would. A big part of his job was really difficult, and it was a job that I had to do after a while, which was standing up to the people above him, protecting his group and his project. People talk about manager being an umbrella versus, I don't know what the opposite is, a funnel or something.
Yeah.
He was a really good umbrella. He did a really good job of dealing with all this crap out there and keeping it away so that people on his team could focus on what we were building and do it on time, and really good at making it clear to us what our goals were, what was important, while still being, just a very accessible and friendly guy. I've had some scary bosses before. He was never a scary boss. He was like somebody I just immediately, looked up to, I guess, who helped me whenever I needed it. So I probably learned a lot from him about how I wanted to be as a boss someday. Yeah.
I feel like you have two kinds of bosses, the ones that show you how to be and the ones that show you how not to be, but you learn.
Yeah, and I had both later on. I had some of both. But I was lucky the first 10 years basically to have, directly or indirectly, one boss that I learned a lot from.
Yeah. See a ton in your career.
He actually worked for me for a while later, which was really weird.
It is, but it isn't. I swear every single person that you interact with comes back into your games world in some way you wouldn't expect. So
yeah,
it's all very connected. Where did he work with you or for you?
Well, later when I was running games, I needed somebody to run this group that was having trouble, and he was looking for something to do. I was like, great, come help me with this broken group. I really I really need somebody who knows how to fix a group.
Perfect.
Yeah.
But yeah, he did a good job. Well, thank you for talking with us. This is Ed Fries, co-founder of Xbox and general partner of OneUp. Ed, where can people go to learn more about you and your fund?
Well, oneupventures.com or oneupfund.com is our website. Yeah, and you can find me on LinkedIn.
Thank you so much. Great to talk to you.
I had fun today. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to the show this week. To catch all the latest from Here's Waldo, you can follow us on LinkedIn. Be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes. We'll see you next time.